This is the end. Hold your breath and count to 10. Not only is this a line from a much better musical Bond theme, but it is fitting for the final Craig era James Bond film that puts a cap on his time in the role of the super spy. But is this end a fitting one? Well, I could end my review right here and simply say, no, not really. But before I go on and explain my feelings about the film in general, let me give a tiny bit of background about my bond with Bond. I've been a fan of James Bond since elementary school, which, for those keeping count, has been over 20 years. Anyway, I knew of Bond, my exposure at a young age stemming from a weird era of cartoons that touched upon characters from the spy movies. In this case, a show called James Bond Jr., complete with an equally weird yet undeniably 80s theme song.
James Bond! James Bond Jr.
But that was about it for a while. My mom, who has been the source of much of my taste in movies, was a fan before me, but what ultimately began my lifelong love of the character and his world was GoldenEye 64. Yep, a video game started me on this path. Being a massive fan of that game at the time, I decided that I wanted to see the movie it was based upon, and from there, my mom's love of the films inspired me to explore them for myself. I started collecting the movies, then posters and art, collectibles, novels, and the like. I became a Bond fan for life. In my more diluted days during college, I even wrote a couple of short scripts for James Bond short films. And they weren't bad when I think back, but maybe that's my nostalgia. Need to see if I can find those somewhere. Anyway, to fully explain and analyze my appreciation of the character would take a great deal of time across the many forms of media in which he has been presented, but much of my love and sometimes eye-rolling cynicism is derived from the films. While the Eon James Bond films together equal the single most successful movie franchise of all time by a long shot, possibly only rivaled by the likes of Toho's Godzilla films in terms of amount of movies alone. There are great movies, middle-of-the-road movies, and simply bad movies. I'd like to do a more in-depth look at each Bond film in the future, but for now, No Time to Die disappointingly falls into the middle category. Admittedly, I was skeptical when Daniel Craig was first announced as Bond back in 2005 or so. Not because of his blonde hair, which many had issue with, but more because I had grown to accept Pierce Brosnan as a superb Bond. And in retrospect, the only downside to Brosnan were the one-liners and later movies written for him. But Casino Royale, for all its grittiness and less conventional Bond film but Fleming appropriate flavor, was an excellent movie. Maybe it was because I was and am a fan of the Dalton era, brief as it was. Bond fans are always quick to give Craig sole credit to returning Bond to his darker literary roots, but Timothy Dalton kind of beat him to the punch. But I was sold with Casino Royale. However, in the film's sense, the only standout was 2012 Skyfall because, again, it hearkened to the literary bonds of old, added in a great deal of flair, and dared to be different without shaking up the formula too much. It delved into some of Bond's personal history, which is generally alluded to. Bond is basically a cardboard archetype, after all. It had a threatening villain that acted as an intellectual yet sexual threat to Bond, and it gave him a personal mission that still allowed him to globetrot and face increasingly dangerous situations. So, after the stumble of Spectre, which wasted the thrilling potential of Christoph Waltz as infamous Bond baddie Blofeld, and after following the pattern of every other movie in the Craig era being good, of course, none were as weak as Quantum of Solace. How did No Time to Die not end on a higher note? Let's tackle the plot first. Bond, who has been retired from MI6 since his split from Léa Seydoux' Madeleine Swann, is called back into action by the CIA, particularly returning Felix Leiter Jeffrey Wright, and MI6 to hunt for a missing scientist that leads him into the path of a deadly villain named Lucifer Safin. Lucifer. Really? Really? Guys, you get it? Do you get it? Really, do you get it? Big brain time. Lucifer. Who not only has a vendetta against Spectre, but the world at large, and plans to wipe out much of the world with a weapon called Heracles that can target specific genetic codes. Bond faces his deadliest and most personal mission ever, joining forces with a Cuban agent played by Ana de Armas and the 00 who replaced him played by Lashana Lynch. Now, on the surface, this sounds like typical Bond fare. Agent drawn back into world of espionage? Check. Megalomaniacal supervillain with unrealistic weapon? Check. Brawls, car chases, and crazy stunts? Check. In terms of what the movie gets right, these things all tick those boxes. As a fan of these films, I love familiarity, and I know that too much familiarity can get stale. But like I mentioned, Casino Royale and Skyfall did this balancing act well, but it was some of the new ideas for the Bond series, which are in fact becoming tired new age Hollywood tropes, that derailed it for me. For the good, mostly. Okay, not all of this is good here, but this is the order I followed in previous reviews, so here goes. The actors all do a serviceable job. Probably the most important here, obviously, is Daniel Craig, and he continues his half monk, half hitman that began in Casino Royale. But here, he is injected with a bit more desperate emotion. There's a reason for this, which I'll cover later during spoilerish portions, but for Bond, it feels shoehorned. Sure, Bond can have emotionally touching moments. Think back to the death of Diana Riggs Tracy in George Lazenby's single Bond film on Her Majesty's Secret Service, or even Judi Dench's M's death in Skyfall. But I can't help but feel that he is too humanized. Bond's supporting characters all do adequately as expected, but for many, the standout in the film is Ana de Armas, playing a Cuban agent named Paloma, and she is labeled as a competent, intelligent, and humorous foil for Bond, basically turning the stereotypical Bond girl trope on its head, and that was kind of cool, but I still felt she didn't serve much as a small part of the film. I think, though, more than any other character, I was put off the most by Rami Malek's Safin. Sure, he's scarred like all the memorable Bond baddies. Sure, he's smart. Sure, he's creepy, but that's about it. I get that they were trying to go for a villain like Blofeld, who has a small part in the film as a Hannibal Lecter-esque character, or Javier Bardem's Silva from Skyfall. But for all the parading around and seeming to want every Craig villain since Skyfall to have a personal connection to 007, it really isn't like that. Not really. Oh, other than his targeting of Madeline. Either way, he's actually kind of flat in that respect, too. Now, I wasn't a fan of the change in background for Blofeld and Spectre that made him Bond's foster brother, but he at least had a bit more personality. And honestly, Safin's plot, I mean, Bond villains are psychotic and their plans are sometimes ridiculous, but there is usually some form of logic. Safin's plan, well, is mainly about revenge, but I found it lackluster when you try to think about it. Funny how the greatest villainous scheme in a Bond film was setting off a nuclear bomb inside of Fort Knox. Now, I did enjoy how they employed some of Blofeld's literary tropes into Safin, namely the Garden of Death from the novel You Only Live Twice, but that's about it. Malik is a great actor, but like Waltz, they didn't use him to his potential. Lastly, and I know this is being picky, but I still don't understand how Seydoux Madeline is the one woman that Bond abandoned his job for. She's just so boring and lifeless to me. And that's just a complaint that carried over from the previous film. She doesn't really improve here, and I'm not sure if it's the actress outright or something else. She just didn't do anything for me as a character at all. Vesper Lynd from Casino Royale is and was the best Bond girl in the Craig films. So, as for the music, I think Hans Zimmer did a serviceable job, but I still miss the music by David Arnold, who always delivered bombastically intense variations to the original James Bond theme in the more modern movies, especially during exciting moments. But Zimmer's music is good enough for this film. I can't complain about it, but what I can complain about is the main theme song. I have yet to understand the world's obsession with Billie Eilish, and I'm sure many people would argue with me. I just think she's an atrocious singer. The lyrics to the song are decent, sure, but her voice, which sounds like a love child of boredom and Prince Valium, annoys me. I've more clearly understood patients coping from after effects of anesthesia after extensive dental surgery. Honestly, I think Sam Smith's theme for Spectre was better, despite his, annoying to me, love for going nasally falsetto. But at least it's not as bad as Madonna's Die Another Day. Still, I mean, I'd almost take Cardi B doing a Bond theme over Billie Eilish.
So I don't know where you're going to deport him. Deport him to hell. Or deport him to London.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
Wait, no. Never mind. Sorry. I doubt Cardi B could even spell Bond, much less sing a song about him. But give Hollywood time. Okay, so in order to cover what I disliked most about the film, and I'm sure many of you can guess, I have to dig deep. Spoiler time. Those who have not seen the film, avert your eyes and ears, and if you haven't, well, James Bond dies. Yeah, not really a spoiler by now, but it could be to someone somewhere who hasn't devoted the time to a nearly 3-hour film. Seriously, who said that making this movie that long was a good idea? Like what I mentioned in my review of Halloween Kills. But so help me if the writers pull the same crap we've been seeing in other films and kill Laurie Strode off in her final fight, which I see becoming a cheap out that everyone keeps taking in movie series and trilogies. Yeah, Hollywood writers. I read Beowulf and other epic hero stories too, where the hero dies in the end. I'll go Michael on Sartain's head on someone. Why is it that Hollywood feels so compelled to kill heroes off so they can start fresh? I would point out the hilarity of ending the film with the originally typical James Bond will return tag, but in all honesty, until Craig's films, there was an incredibly loose continuity anyway. And I guess that's how I have to take it. Still, it doesn't feel earned or deserved. It feels like a cop-out. For me, the point of James Bond films have always been escapism in its purest sense. Action, adventure, thrills, exotic locales, gunfights, gadgets, all that stuff. And with that, they always had the feeling of a sort of spy serial. You want the hero, even though James Bond was always simply a component of each movie and not the sole reason to watch, to be victorious and survive. Sure, he faces death-defying and impossible situations, but that's the fun. Killing him just so it can be revealed that he fathered a child, which wasn't a freaking secret, didn't work for me. And I don't care that the literary Bond was fatalistic. That's part of the charm of the tortured hero. You don't give the character what they want. Maybe all the bleeding hearts out there enjoyed it, but I found it shallow. I could continue rambling and maybe I sound like a spoiled old man griping, but it still felt cheap and I can't forgive that. Maybe time will help, but I doubt it. Most reviewers have lauded this film above most, if not all of the others in the 25 movies long series. But because of this weak ending and other complaints, I can only award it a middling score of 5 out of 10. And like a child you're not mad at but disappointed in, it hurts more than flat out hating it. I'll keep my eyes out for what Barbara Broccoli and company do next for the super spy, but if this film is an indicator of how the trends related to Bond are going to go, I won't turn my back on it completely. I just won't be waiting with bated breath. Bond has always been capable of adapting to the times, but here, perhaps, it is time to die. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed, please like, comment, and subscribe. New content will be coming, and in the meantime, check out what I posted on my channel and be sure to follow me on Twitter. Later.